Hare Krishna, dear devotees. I'm very glad to invite you our online Sangha on this very special day. Today is Vijayadashmi, Lord Ramchandra's victory over Ravana. So it's a very important occasion. Right after the conclusion of the 9 days known as Navaratri, there's also an incident behind that, how the external energy of the Lord Durga actually won over Mahishasura, who was another demon who had some powers due to his austerities, and with his power he started to create a lot of trouble for everyone. So therefore Durga appeared and took care of him. Today is also a special day because it's also appearance day of Sriman Madhvacharya. Sripad Madhvacharya, as we know, is in our disciplic succession. So we are known as Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So today is also another special occasion. We have a very special guest, and he has a very interesting thing to narrate to us. His Grace Brahmatirtha Prabhu has kindly joined us to give some interesting account of his visit to India, how he met with Srila Prabhupada, and what happened eventually. We all know about this book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, and he is the main person in that, starting the conversation with Srila Prabhupada, and then eventually all his questions were satisfactorily responded to by Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada himself suggested this book be published. Okay, I'm going to request Yashika to kindly introduce our special guest to our online Sangha. Take over, Yashika.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome once again to our Sunday Feast program. As Guru Prasad Prabhuji said, today is a very auspicious day, and we're fortunate to have the association of His Grace Brahmatirtha Das Prabhuji. Prabhuji was born in New Jersey in 1949. He got his bachelor's in chemistry from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in 1971 and his master's in geology from Rutgers University in 1975. After a 20 years career as a geologist, as well as the vice president of a large environmental company, Prabhuji is now an environmental consultant for state governments. He has been a member of Bhaktivedanta Institute since its establishment in 1976, and he also gave a presentation at their first international conference on Life Comes from Life in 1977. He's worked on many projects with Slapud Das Prabhuji, who's also known as R.L. Thompson, from 1995 to 2008. Currently, Prabhuji serves as the director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies, and he's also the co-director of ISKCON Resolve. His conversation with Srila Prabhupada is memorialized in the book Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, which is also related to his topic that he will be speaking on today, which is the inner story of the book Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. So once again, I'd like to welcome Prabhuji and hand it over to him. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, we can't hear you, Prabhu.
It's muted.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay. Whoever's listening, if you don't mind turning on your camera, please do. You don't have to, but I like seeing who I'm speaking to. Of course, if you're still in bed at 6 o'clock at night, then that may be a little embarrassing and you may not want to turn on your camera. And I fully understand. Otherwise, I like seeing who I'm speaking to, if that's possible. I've learned when I'm giving classes by Zoom, it works out better if I can see the audience. I see my old and very dear friend, Lakshmi Moni there. Hi, Bo, Lakshmi Moni. I'm very happy to see you. I've actually never been to Canada, believe it or not. During the Vietnam War days, I considered going. We used to say it's very cold in Canada, but not drafty. But anyway, Krishna arranged
I don't think anybody got
Krishna arranged that I go to India during that time instead. So let me see. A few more, please turn on your camera. Not everyone has to, but I'd like to see a few more of your smiling faces or top of your heads or whatever we see. Do we have another camera going once, twice, 3 times? Okay. I'll assume those who don't turn on the camera are still in bed. That's fine. But you should be up a little earlier than 6 at night. Anyway, so it's a great honor to be speaking in Canada. And after the next election, if it goes a certain way, I expect many of us will be visiting Canada a lot more often. So we may all be there real soon. So start making room. So I'm glad to be here. Now, let me see. Do I have screen share capability? I do. And do I have a polling capability? Do I have that capability to do polls? I like some audience participation. Sometimes that can work. I guess I don't have capability for polls, so I can't do that.
Prabhu,
Zoom, we try to come up with creative ways to get participation that we can't do in person. Though I must admit, since COVID has come, I've never heard more classes in my life, hours a day, and I've never given more classes, which I don't know how well that goes, but at least for me, Satsarup Maharaj once said to me, chance to give a class, don't let it pass. So here I am as Krishna has arranged. So to offer prayers before we begin. Om Jnana Pyasa Jnana Jnana Chakshashru Umilitam Vyai Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. And I pray that Krishna gives me a little bit of brain for this audience. Now,
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Sorry, now you have access to polls if you would like to.
oh, okay. Let me, polls. Okay. Where do I click for the polls? Thought it was under more.
There should be an icon down there.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be here yet. Live. Let's see. Oh, no, reactions. Not yet, but it's not critically important. Our first question I was going to ask in the poll is how many of you are from India? And then the second question, how many have been to India? And the third question is, how many got Delhi belly? But I wasn't really going to ask that question. So, but I wanted to have some interaction with the audience, but sometimes it doesn't always work. 1968, I was in Greenwich Village. Now, Greenwich Village then was a really, as we used to say in those days, a hip place. It was the happening place in New York. In the East Village was a more bohemian. The West Village was a little more upscale. And Prabhupada settled in the East Village. And I was in New York and I saw a Harinam party. And I'm pretty sure Jayadvaita Swami, Brahmachari then, was part of the party. And I watched them chanting. And I was amazed because there were 2 possibilities that I could imagine. One, these were bigger exhibitionists than the many exhibitionists who wandered around Greenwich Village in those days, showing off their tattoos and nose rings and all kinds of outfits. In order to fit in, you had to be different. As a side story, I once went to Macy's department store to buy some pants, And I noticed if I buy regular jeans, they were $40. And if I buy jeans that already have holes in them, brand new, they were $50. So people want to fit in so badly, they'll pay $10 more to put holes in their pants. So it wasn't very different in the village days then. Now, when I saw the chanting party, I said they're either exhibitionists or they're into something, because they didn't seem to care very much about the world. Especially when you have a blue sock, a red sock, a bed sheet, and a pigtail. I mean, it was different. Now, since I was 10 years old, I remember I just had this burning urge in me to go to India. Don't know where it came from other than obviously previous life. So when I saw these people, I understood it was from India. I was really amazed. I just stared and stared. And then somebody tried to sell me a magazine, but I was an easy hit for panhandlers. And I had vowed after the last panhandler got some money from me, I wouldn't give to anybody else again. So when they came up, said, would I buy a magazine for $25? I said, no. And I regretted it, but I did get a mantra card. And the mantra card said, chant and your life will be sublime. And I couldn't get the mantra out of my head. So the next thing is I started chanting Hare Krishna. And that was a long time ago. I haven't stopped. So it worked. So I saw the devotees there, but then I decided I wanted to find out more about them. So I went into New York City looking for their place and I'd finally, you couldn't Google then. And I finally discovered their address was 26 2nd Avenue. So I said, I'm going to go find out what this is about. And I went there. And they had just moved down to, I think, 61 2nd Avenue. And at that time in ISKCON, nobody had invented something. It's an invention, just hasn't happened. Like there was a time when we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have computers. So in 1968 or 9, ISKCON did not have the sign that says we moved to a new location. Such a sign had not been invented yet. So there was no sign on the window. So it took me 6 months more to find out they'd moved down 2nd Avenue. I don't even remember how I found out. And I went there, but the sign again had not yet been invented. They had moved to 439 Henry Street. So now I went through, finally, I made it to 439 Henry Street. Found out they were there, walked in, said, now I'm going to find, I like this mantra, I'm going to find out what it's about. And all the smells and everything else was fascinating. So I said, I'd like to buy one of your books. Well, you don't have to twist a devotee's arm when you tell them you walk in and say, I want to buy a book. But the only book they had then was, can anybody guess what book they would have? You can put it in the chat. Around 1969, let's say.
Easy Journey to Other Planets.
Nope, not published yet in America. Any other guesses? Think of the worst book to give somebody who knows nothing about the philosophy. Any other guess?
Bhagavad Gita, chapters 1 to 6. Bhagavad Gita.
Not Bhagavad Gita. That would have been wonderful. I would have
Sri
loved to have had that. What's that?
Sri Upanishad?
Nope, was not. That would have been perfect for me. Gosh, that book would have just been exactly what I needed.
Because when I joined in 68, there was Easy Journey, but it wasn't in book form. It was a mimeograph.
Yeah, this was a book.
Bhagavatam first canto.
Not published in America yet.
Nectar
First
of
canto would have
Devotion.
been perfect for me. Second canto.
Bhagavatam's second canto.
That was so much philosophy and information, but this book was esoteric. It was intended more for internally for devotees. And when I got the book, I couldn't tell if I was reading it backwards or forwards. I love the book. It's a fantastic book. But for your first book, it's a little book.
Nectar of Devotion.
Yes, Nectar of Devotion. And I said, I'm going to take this home and I'm going to find out what this is about. But I didn't understand the words, because a lot of the words are rasa and this and that. So I said, okay. So all it did is got me more interested. I said, okay, this book doesn't get me there. I need to learn more. Then I was in college and I took, I picked up from the village a copy of the Gita. Prabhupada's wasn't available yet. And I picked up Franklin Edgerton's Gita and read that. And Franklin Edgerton wrote an interesting Gita, decent translation. Anybody read Franklin Edgerton's Gita? Don't. Okay, because he has an essay in there, and the essay goes, Tat Twam Asi, thou art that. In other words, you are God. And when I read it, I would say I knew that was BS, but BS comes from a cow and is pure. So maybe that's not the right term to use, but I knew it wasn't correct. Then in college, I took a course on Oriental philosophy from a very good professor. And I read, we read Dr. Radhakrishn's Gita, the one Prabhupada recommended without the purports. Again, it was more, I didn't have much Mayavadi tendency, and I was unimpressed. So I said, okay. Then at that time in America, a phenomena happened beginning around 66, more like around 66, 67. An interesting phenomena happened. India changed its visa laws. And America changed its visa laws, and the Indians could start getting visas to America. Before that, it was almost impossible. And of course, Prabhupada got his visa, and then the yogis started coming. Rajneesh and this one and that one. And the New York Post made a centerfold each week of the latest guru to come from India, sort of making fun of them. And each one would declare, I am God, you are God, do whatever you like. Some of them were actually innocuous, like Maharishi, which teach you a mantra, TM, he was kind of innocuous. Some of them, like Rajneesh, were actually dangerous. And there are others like Guru Maharajji were just odd. And, so you had some sincere folks and mostly a menagerie. So I said, how can I figure out who's real? And the question comes up, and probably many of you have had this question. Some of you may still have this question. How do I know if the Hare Krishna movement is really bona fide? How do you know if this really is the essence of the Gita? I mean, it's a fair question. How do we know what's made up and what's not? And with all the yogis coming, it gets confusing. So I came to a conclusion, the only conclusion I could come to. Can anybody guess what my conclusion was?
You went to India.
I have to go to India. Can't find out unless I go to India. So I applied for the Peace Corps, and it was very hard to get in the Peace Corps then. A lot of applicants. If you got in the Peace Corps and you wanted India, you sure got it, because it was considered the worst assignment, almost the worst in the world, because it was very, very austere. In fact, so I got in and I got accepted. And as soon as I finished college, I was off to India. And my training all was in India. And when the folks who were training me, I was replacing them. I was a high school teacher in Bihar, India. And anybody, hope I'm not insulting any, but anybody who knows about Bihar, it's like the Bronx of India. And when my predecessors described the living situation, I said, if I ever have to live like that, I'm going home. And when I got there, it was nothing like they had described.
It was worse.
It was much, much worse. Krishna gave me a special blessing. I had, you might say, the worst state. And then in that state, I had the worst assignment. And I was mostly among Adivasi people working in a high school. But by Krishna's grace, it was the closest assignment to Calcutta. So I used to go to Calcutta just to take a break. I only got a few hundred rupees a month, but a train was like 5 rupees or something. So I'd go to Calcutta, and I saw a sign, Hare Krishna Festival. Now, I had gone to Kurukshetra on a training assignment. I had been to many temples and mosques and churches, and I asked everybody the same question: why are you here? And all I got was karma kanda, be it Christians, Muslims, Hindus, it didn't make a difference. I'm here to get something from God. They treated God as if God was Amazon.com. You put in your credit card, or you cut off your hair, or give your donation, and then you expect the package to arrive the next day at your doorstep, be it a dowry, money, whatever it is. They treated God as if he was Amazon. Now, admittedly, Jeff Bezos is very, very rich, but he's not God. And in India, I was very disappointed. So what could I do? So I was in Calcutta, and I saw a sign, and I would ask people. I was at Kurukshetra. I went to just on a training assignment, and I went to the University of Kurukshetra, the student center, and students mobbed me. You didn't see Western people there other than hippies. And the Peace Corps cut off all my hair, so I didn't qualify as a hippie. So there I am at the student center, surrounded by students. They're buying me a milkshake. They're so glad to see me. I say, I have one question for you. Do you ever chant Hare Krishna? I want to know. And they said, Krishna, this is Kurukshetra. The chariot's there, the temple chariot. This is the place. I didn't even know I was going to Kurukshetra. The bus station has a different name. It's Tanasur. I didn't even know it was Kurukshetra until I got there. And for those who have read The Journey Home by Radha Swami, it was about a week after Radha Swami had passed through there. We were both wandering around India at the same time. And I said, do you chant Hare Krishna? I want to know. And they said, Krishna, we want to talk about Nixon and politics, and because they're about to have a war with Pakistan. So I gave up. Okay. Then I was in Calcutta, and I saw a sign, Hare Krishna Festival. I said, this is it. This is it. So I went to see what that's about. And there was Giriraj Brahmachari speaking. And 49 years later, I can still remember his talk. It was so good, so brilliant, so philosophically spot on. He spoke to this audience. It was a very fancy part of Calcutta. I forgot the name of it, very fancy part. And all the people, lunchtime, they're out of their offices in suits and ties, and devotees are there in dhotis and all. And Giriraj Swami says, my father is a high court judge. I'm from a very rich family. I gave it all up to put on the simple cloth and chant Hare Krishna. And you're going after what I threw out. You're trying to be what I gave up. And I said, finally, after months and months in India, somebody said one thing that made sense to me philosophically. I was very happy. And then I started, whenever I could get away from teaching, taking the overnight train to Calcutta, staying at the Salvation Army hostel, and visiting the temple. And then I had the good fortune of November 71, Prabhupada was there. So I was brought in to see Prabhupada. So do you have any questions? I said, oh, yes. I had just come from Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha had received enlightenment. I sat under allegedly the sapling of the original tree, and I sat under it. And of course, nothing happened. But anyway, I sat under it. So I gave it a try. You have to give it a try. And then I was really hungry. So I went to the Tibetan Buddhist camp thinking they'll have some vegetarian food. I had nothing vegetarian. Another day in India, the only thing I could eat was Britannica crackers, but so be it. So I went to see Prabhupada. He says, so what question do you have? I said, well, why are you following the Hindu path? Why not the Buddhist path? Kind of a dumb question. So Prabhupada answered a very interesting way. Can anyone guess how Prabhupada would have answered that? Turns out it's very typical how he would answer such questions. Any guess how Prabhupada would have answered that question?
What do you like? What do you want to do? What's your interest?
Close, getting close. That's close. What he asked me was, what did the Buddha say? Prabhupada wasn't going to represent. He wanted to discuss not ism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism. He didn't want to discuss isms. He wanted to discuss philosophy. So he asked me, what did the Buddha say? And then he would respond to that, like in the dialectical spiritualism, in that philosophy discussions Prabhupada had with Hari Griva and Shama Sundar. They would say to Prabhupada, Hegel says this, Aristotle said that, and Prabhupada would respond. So Prabhupada said, what did the Buddha say? So I said, well, fourfold noble and eight path, or eightfold noble and four path. And I got all mixed up. I said, I don't know. He said, well, why are you asking the question if you don't know what he said? So at that point, I knew when to zip it shut and just listen. So that's what I did. Then I was in Calcutta again in February, and I ran into some devotees, and they said, we're doing food relief for Bangladesh refugees. There's just been this huge war with India and Pakistan. East Pakistan became Bangladesh. Americans were unpopular at that time because the Soviet Union sided with India and America sided with Pakistan in Cold War politics. I technically worked on a dual assignment to the American government and the Bihari government. I mean, still a few hundred rupees a month, but technically I worked for the American government, so I wasn't very popular. I was arrested for being a spy. I wasn't. All kinds of things. So when the devotee said, would you like to get away to food relief? I want to get out of the cities, away from people, and just go to the countryside. Sounded wonderful. So I took a train and a boat. And when I got off, a wonderful devotee, Tejas, met me there. And he had been in the Peace Corps, it turns out. And so we hit it off right away. We still remain friends. And he said, would you like to meet Prabhupada again? Well, let me give you the scene at Mayapur. At Mayapur at that time, there were 2 buildings until the day I arrived. Then it was reduced to 1 building. There was Prabhupada's Bhajan Kutir, which is still there, and Prabhupada's outhouse, which is a straw outhouse. Tamal Krishna Maharaj had just bought the land a month before, and Achutananda built this hut, the Bhajan Kutir, for Prabhupada. It's a little larger now and more permanent than it used to be, but basically it's the same thing. And then it was Prabhupada's outhouse made of straw. And one devotee had the brilliant idea to put a stick of incense in the outhouse, and then poof, there was 1 building in Mayapur. That only took about a second. And so anyway, so we had 1 building, a men's tent, a women's tent, and a pandal tent. And there was absolutely nothing you could buy in Mayapur other than somebody would walk by with coconuts. And the water was a new tube well that was, kind of like drinking chalk water. So coconuts was it. And that was it. There was nothing, no shops, no biscuits, nothing. And serving out thousands and thousands of refugees a day. So it was fun. It was nice. It was austere, but it was very, very pleasant. And then Tejas took me and said, now you have to meet Prabhupada. So I walked in, and this time I knew better than to ask dumb questions like that. And I had just a little bit about me. I had had a disability as a kid that prevented me from doing any sports or mixing a whole lot. So I wanted to get away from people. So I spent a lot of my youth in the woods thinking and reading. And I didn't know why that happened, but it was Krishna's special blessing for me to have that kind of a lone childhood, because by the time I got to India, I'd done a lot of thinking. I mean, it's only 22, but I'd done a lot of thinking, and I was very impressed by Prabhupada. So the very first conversation we had was not recorded, unfortunately. The book begins Perfect Questions. It doesn't begin at the beginning. First one's recorded because Prabhupada began a normal conversation. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you live? It was a much more normal exchange. And then we started talking about that I'm a science teacher. And then we got interrupted, it ended. And I thought that was it. And then Prabhupada called me back into his Bhajan Kutir, and then we began the conversation. And Shyama-Sundar hit the record button. He said, "This is good stuff." So he started recording it. I didn't know it was being recorded. When I sat there, I didn't offer obeisances. I wasn't a devotee. I just bowed my head, did pranam, and I sat at Prabhupada's feet, and I just looked at his feet the whole time. And in the Gita, it says, approach a spiritual master. And what's the next part?
Ask relevant questions with a humble service attitude.
Say it louder.
Ask relevant questions and have a humble service attitude.
Yeah, approach a spiritual master, inquire submissively, render service, and he'll give you the truth. Well, I was feeding refugees. I thought in my mind, in my search for a guru, and I had met some that I could tell you the stories, but I'll tell you one side story. I was visiting one ashram in Patna where I was living at the time. And it was an interesting ashram because they had a lot of Western people there. And the guru particularly liked young Western blonde ladies, it turns out. Okay, you can start seeing pictures developing. So I was talking to them. I mean, they're Western people dressed in kind of like we might dress. And so I asked them, I said, "Oh, tell me about your guru." "Oh, he's God." I said, "Oh," I was very naive at that time. I said, "That's interesting. I always wanted to meet God, you know." Anyway, where is he? "Well, he's in prison," because he was very, very political. I guess I can say the group, maybe I'll leave it out, but very, very politically, did a lot of nasty politics. I said, "Oh, well, which prison? Maybe I can see God in the prison." "Well, he's actually in the prison hospital." I said, "Oh, what's wrong with him?" "Oh, his hemorrhoids are really bad." This was God with bad hemorrhoids. Okay, put a big X on my list of gurus to knock off the list. And we had a few more like that. So by the time I met Prabhupada, I got the hemorrhoid off the list. I got a few others off the list. I got another one that made magic powder appear, but I met his assistant, who was my age, American guy, and he was leaving India. And I said, "Why are you leaving? You met such a great guru. He knows Gita. He does mystical things." I thought that was really cool. He said, "Well, he got tired of him reaching in his pants." So I, scratch that one off the list. So we scratched a few off the list, and it kept going back. Prabhupada was bona fide. I started understanding that. That was my original question. So then when I approached Prabhupada, I approached him with, I'm going to inquire submissively. I don't know if he knows. I can't say for sure he's the real guru, as bona fide as they make him, but I can say for sure that I want to hear from him. And I'm not going to challenge him. I won't challenge him. I just want to learn what I can. And then I like ruminating on things. I'll go think about it. So accidentally, believe me, I'm not any kind of saint, but accidentally, I hit the right formula, render service and all. And Prabhupada was pleased with the questions, and he kept calling me back 2, 3, 4 times a day to go talk to him. Now, there was a secret reason he was doing that. Would you like to know the secret reason? At least that's my opinion. There was 70 devotees in Mayapur and one guest. One guest and one ticket machine. You know, like you go to a shop and you have to wait in line. They have tickets for your number. So there was one ticket machine. At least it seemed that way, where devotees can take a number to see who gets me next. At least it felt that way, if there wasn't a literal ticket machine. Because everyone was preaching to me. One devotee came to me and said, I had a cold. I was taking the normal over-the-counter things. You shouldn't take that. Only Ayurvedic. It's sinful. It's horrible. Devotees have two religions, Krishna and nothing allopathic. One is based on pure science, Krishna. The other is based on mental speculation, nothing allopathic. Anyway, so then the next devotee comes up to me and says, gee, I heard you have some aspirin. Can I have one? So this was going on like this. And then there were wonderful people like Yadabar and Vishaka, and he had been in the Peace Corps. So I was able to relate to them. And there were other devotees, names to be unmentioned, who, if you didn't dance enough at Arti, could grab you and shake you up and down. And everyone was, practically in their young 20s, maybe somebody a few years older. So it was an interesting crowd, and there was one guest and everyone wanted to preach to me. So what did Prabhupada do? He kept me in his Bhajan Kutir all day to protect me. Because he knew, I was educated, I was a teacher, I wasn't a hippie, so he kept me there all day to protect me, but I wouldn't surrender. I'd just talk. Then on Gaur Purnima night, this was the Gaur Purnima festival, a mystical thing happened to me. There were many mystical things that happened, but I'll tell you 2 of the mystical things and then we'll stop for questions. One mystical thing is Yamuna, wonderful, wonderful Yamuna, came up to me. It was full moon. There were no lights there except a little generator on the pandal. So very bright, starry skies, full moon, and there were tears in her eyes. And I could see it glistening in the moonlight. And for anyone who knew Yamuna, if you had to say a word of what does she radiate, it's love from every pore. You can hear it when she sings Govinda prayers in the morning. You can read her biography. You can see it in her writings. I mean, it's just love. So she love bombed me, as we used to call it then. Said, you are so fortunate. You are so fortunate. Prabhupada is giving you all his time. I was probably the last, I think I was the last devotee that Prabhupada personally, a new person, gave so much time to. 65, 66, 67, see, even 68, Prabhupada could spend a lot of time. By now it's 72, there's, thousands and thousands of devotees. So it was no longer Prabhupada's job to do that. But being the only guest, I was fortunate. Said, you're so fortunate. Prabhupada's giving you all his time every day. And after that, I went for a walk behind the pandal, and I did something very uncharacteristic of me. I collapsed. And I just started crying my eyes out because I knew what was next. So the next morning, Prabhupada calls me in and I said, well, thank you very much for all your time. Really nice. Thank you. But I have to leave now. Let's go back to my teaching. And Prabhupada says to me, don't talk L-E-A-V-E, talk L-I-V-E. Because Yamuna had scared me that I had to surrender. And I said, you want me to stay? And he goes, yes. And I say, okay, I'll stay longer. And then he said the magic words that your dog is always waiting to hear. What are the magic words your dog wants? Do you know?
Want to go for a walk?
No, not that. Even better.
Good boy.
Magic words Prabhupada said to me. You guess?
How many?
Say again?
Come and eat.
No, that's a good one, but even more magic. I mean, Lord, I'm sure Bhaktivinoda Thakur had a dog named Tiger. Krishna had 2 dogs. We have a lot of experience in this, our Sampradaya. Ramananda Roy had a dog. So we can study these things. What are the words? Let's say a male dog. I'll make it easy. A male dog wants to hear from you. Not that there's a female dog coming either, by the way.
Come
The
close to
magic
me.
words. What's that?
Come close to me.
No, good boy.
Good boy.
Good boy. Those are the magic words. And
Good
Prabhupada
boy.
said to me, good boy. And when he said that to me, I knew I was his dog. And after that, the conversation got much more personal and much deeper. Because Yamuna loved Bami, and then Prabhupada just made me surrender. Even staying a little longer was a huge surrender in many ways. And I became his good boy. So then I became his dog, and I understood that to be so. So that's the inner story on perfect questions, perfect answers. I have other Prabhupada stories I could share as time allows. I want to give you the mystical story, though, another mystical one. Yamuna's was extremely mystical. When I was in college studying the Gita, there's one verse that really bewildered me. Now, remember, I knew no Sanskrit whatsoever. Sanskrit was the furthest thing from my mind, and it just didn't exist for me. But when I studied the Gita in English, I came across a verse and I asked my professor, can you explain this verse to me? Because I just don't understand it. It didn't make sense. And he could not explain it. Then Prabhupada quotes the verse to me in Sanskrit. And he says to me, so you know this? And it was the only English verse. I mean, I didn't know the Sanskrit, I knew. And that's even if one commits the most abominable activities. If he's on the devotional path, he's considered saintly because he's rightly situated. And he quoted to me, I'm looking for it, but anyway, it doesn't pop up this second. Oh, here it is. Apichetsu dasharo bhajate mam anya bhak. And then he goes, have you read it? And yeah, that was the only verse I knew. That's mystical. First one he quotes to me, he knew I didn't know Sanskrit, says it and knew I knew what it was. And it was the last verse he quoted to me before I left. Now, that segues into the next part of what I wanted to say, because I have 2 services in ISKCON. So I'm going to put it on the table for you because maybe there are questions that arise. One, I work with Braja Bihari and ISKCON Resolve, conflict resolution, because I really believe in that verse. No matter what a devotee does, if one's a devotee, they should be considered rightly situated. And as Yamuna said to me, if there's a spark, you always want to fan it. So I just wish devotees, sometimes we could be kinder and gentler to each other. So I've taken up 20 years ago, ISKCON Resolve, because I had a dilemma. It was always, I was born Jewish, we're the chosen people. Yeah. And then I go to India and then we have the Brahmins, and then we have us and the Karmis. And I wanted Samadarshana so badly. And ISKCON Resolve helped me get over my hangups and my false ego. It's helping me, not that I'm over it, for Samadarshana. The second service I have is, I'll show you a picture. This is the last time I saw Prabhupada. I'll share a screen and show you. Here it is. So, can you guess which one's me? 1977, a month before Prabhupada left us in Vrindavan.
You're in the back in the middle.
That's me. Some get me mixed up with Madhava and Jnana. There's wonderful Srup Damodar and of course Sadaputa. So the last thing I did for Prabhupada was speak at the conference, Life Comes from Life. And there were many great adventures. Then we, as friends of Sadaputa, we kind of revived some of the BI because the BI, for whatever reason, partitioned, especially after Sri Damodar Maharaj left. And so a lot of Sadaputa's friends got together. We got all of his books back in print. They're all on Amazon. And then we started reviving the BI. And we did a conference last year. We had 450 people come, including 50 PhDs from all over the world. And then just last week, we got a new headquarters for the BI. I'll show you a picture of it. It's quite amazing. It's a mile from the University of Florida campus. Used to be the president's mansion. It's all paid for. Krishna just made an amazing arrangement. And we'll show you one more picture. The other picture disappeared, so I won't show you one more picture. I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions, comments, criticisms, or anything that you'd like to share that may be relevant for the class. Any reflections that you have, share. I'd like to hear from some of you. I spoke too much and you've driven me all now to drink. Water.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. What did Prabhupada say about the Apichit Sudarataro verse? How did he explain it to you?
Well, that's a good question. I was talking to Prabhupada about if a person wants to become rich, praise to Krishna, will he become rich? He says, he can become rich. Prabhupada said, yes. I said, you pray, you get rich? Because I was so turned off by, people just doing what I now know is karma kanda. I was really turned off by that. And Prabhupada says, praying to Krishna is not evil. Somehow or other, he prays to Krishna. So you cannot say that he is evil. And then he quotes the verse. Again, the only verse I knew. So as soon as he begins to pray to Krishna, that is not evil. Therefore, Krishna is all attractive. So Prabhupada explained that if you're praying to Krishna, it's not evil. So that was the context for that. Thank you for asking that nice question. You're the first one to ever ask me that question. That's pretty good. I never spoke on the book until COVID came. It was just some kind of embarrassment, silly on my part, but I never spoke on the book because I didn't like speaking about me, but Krishna forced it. So now I have to do this service. And you're the first one to, given a bunch of talks on it, you're the first one to ask me such a good question. Thank you.
Jai.
So what other questions, comments, reflections, criticisms?
Can I
Anything
say
else?
something, Prabhuji?
Please.
Hare Krishna. I just want to thank you for not today's class, but all your questions that you asked at that time, because I read your book, like Perfect Questions and Perfect Answers, and it gave me the answers of my questions that I had that you asked on behalf of me to Prabhupada at that time. So really, I got all the answers of my questions because of you. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really kind of you. You've made me very
Thank
happy
you.
today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm glad I could be an instrument of service for Prabhupada. The book is now, I think, in 44 languages, and
Wow.
Jayapataka Swami is going to put a display at the Bhajan Kutir of the book.
Wow.
I get amazed in how many languages in, including one in Africa that you can only pronounce it by clicking your tongue. I can't tell you what language that is. Okay. Any other questions about perfect questions or ISKCON conflict resolution, ISKCON, or the Bhaktivedanta Institute and our mission, and any of these topics, or any other topic, or I just gave a podcast, Chaitanya Charan, with my good friend Piyari Mohan on using humor in outreach. So, and when Piyari, when Chaitanya Charan introduced Piyari, they introduced me, and he goes, and Brahma Tirtha is intellectual. So I go like this. And on Dandavats, that was the cover picture for the lead-in. I did a TED for that, but I thought it was pretty funny. So we can talk about strategies for outreach, anything you like that I can share with you. We have some other, yes, Rinda.
Yeah. I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying, but I did have a question.
Please.
I felt the same way as the lady earlier, that you had asked my questions. And so that had been very, very helpful to me years and years ago. Recently, so I actually tend to hand out your book or the book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, to new Western people, because I tend to think that they'll be their questions too. And so one day in the summer, I did that again to a new Western person. And then I sat down to enjoy the book myself again, because I remembered it so fondly. And I was also thinking, what is she going to think about it as she's reading it? And within a couple paragraphs, I came across an unusual thing that never, ever bothered me before, but now it bothered me, was, so everybody's laughing because Krishna has pushed Radharani down and is kissing her against her will. Can you comment on how we should handle that now?
What a nice question. And I appreciate your lead into it. But what a nice question. I'd have to look at the book and find that specifically, but let's not bother that. It's a very thoughtful question. And it takes us into an area of hermeneutics. For hermeneutics, as many of you will know, is the science of understanding scripture. And there's a hermeneutics that Prabhupada gave us. And the hermeneutics is called Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. And so we have a way of understanding what are really important principles of devotional service and what are flexible details. So giving a hermeneutical analysis to what you're saying is woman wants to be abused. And we have that verse in the fourth canto, which, the so-called rape verse, things like this. But when lovers are playful with each other, it's different. It's not abuse, it's love. For example, I'll give an example. When my kids were young, we would wrestle. And it's not abuse. Sometimes we get hurt, but it was just playful wrestling. We would just wrestle with each other and, doing our boys. So, it was a lot of fun. And we do things. We went out, one of my sons ended up being a federal secret agent chasing cartels, drug cartels. And it started when he was 10. That's all he wanted to do. And what did he do when he got a few years older? Started playing paintball. And so he dragged me into the woods with him, and we're shooting each other with paintball. Now, we're not hurting each other, but it's affectionate. It's an affectionate thing. So it's not unusual for lovers to be affectionate, and sometimes there may be there were times when Radharani would make life very difficult for Krishna. Sometimes Krishna would make things difficult for Radharani. The best presentations I see of this that I've read, I mean, there's plenty out there, but I like Shivaram Swami is particularly good at presenting Leela in a very chaste, but very profound, deep manner without holding back. So I found his books are very useful that way. So the spirit, everything that's good in the material world is just a reflection, somewhat perverted, of the real spiritual world. So if children roughhouse with their parents here, certainly in the spiritual world, you know, it's done in the purest way. And we see Mother Yasoda even tried to tie Krishna up, which is, that time is coming very soon. And she wasn't very good at it, but she tried hard. It just, you know, it's hard to tie God up. Does that answer your question, or is there some angle I might have missed?
Thank you very much. That was beautiful. It doesn't at all answer my question, because I am totally fine with everything that you said. How does a new person hitting that 3 paragraphs into the book, how do we...
That's even a better question. Okay, I understand. That's a good question. So when new people see these things, nobody has ever raised that issue before. Has anybody raised it with you, a new person? You're muted now.
Nobody has actually raised it, and neither have all the people to whom I've given Bhagavad Gitas come back to me about the less intelligent thing, which makes me understand that they didn't read very far. Maybe didn't read at all. And I don't want to bring it up if it isn't bothering them. I always say to them, get back to me if there's anything that, you know, doesn't seem to sit right. Let's talk about it. But so far, I think the reason they haven't gotten back to me is either they didn't read it, or they were so turned off that I've never seen or heard of them again.
I would just like to say something.
Lakshmimoni, please, I need your help.
At the time that those books were written, when Prabhupada spoke that way, it was very common. There was me, Tarzan, you, Jane, you know, this whole conception of a guy in the trees hitting a girl over the head with a club and dragging her off by the hair to make her his wife, and she was in bliss about it. And I think the number one answer that I give to people in that regard is really you need to read more, because you have to understand it in context. You have to understand who Radharani is and what her relationship with Krishna is. So against her will doesn't mean that she was forced. It just means they were kind of playing, and she, you know, was playing hard to get, so to speak, and he, you know, responded. But that's obvious when you read, even minimally, if you read Prabhupada's books, and you start to read who Radharani is, you'll quite easily understand that the association between them was more than affectionate. It was supra affectionate. So, you know, someone just has to go beyond and has to be willing to ask questions. And the answers are definitely there, especially in terms of Radharani. In Srimati Radharani, Prabhupada says the people of Vrindavan worship her more than they worship Krishna. Yeah. So you can't really read just the first 3 paragraphs and expect that you understand everything. It's not possible.
Vrinda, Lakshmi, thank you very much. That helps a lot. And when I asked Vaisheshika a similar question about something in the 9th canto, that's exactly what he said to me. Nevertheless, it comes into an issue. Prabhupada expected his disciples, he said so, to write more books. And you know, our language becomes dated and it doesn't quite work as well. And so what do we do with that? I'm not getting at the issue of changing or not changing books. The issue is really different. The issue is we need commentaries, our own commentaries to produce. when the next edition of Perfect Questions comes out, I probably have to write another new introduction. And when I do, I'll take what you said seriously and see if there's issues I should touch upon. But I appreciate you bringing that up. I hadn't thought of that.
I think it's interesting that Prabhupada,
Thank you very much.
I think it's interesting that Prabhupada spoke to you at such an early stage of the game in your spiritual life and about such an intimate relationship between Krishna and Radharani. That because even in his presentation of Krishna consciousness in Krishna book, he didn't really talk about Radha and Krishna in such a deep way, you know. And then when people got into Gopi Bhava, Prabhupada hit the roof, you know, he was furious. So it's interesting that Prabhupada revealed that to you at such an early stage of the game.
It is. And I think Prabhupada knew I was listening. So he was, I can't say what he was thinking, but I can say nothing he said turned me off, let's put it that way. And it all made me go much deeper. I just never thought it would be a book. And at the end, after it was done, Shama Sundar turned to Prabhupada and said, those are perfect questions. And Prabhupada said, make that the book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. And Prabhupada wrote me a letter saying that would happen. I was kind of shocked. And then when I went back to America, my wife had no idea. We were engaged. I was in India and now married 48 years, but she had no idea that I had met Prabhupada. Before I met Prabhupada, this is in the book, but I wasn't exactly in clear consciousness. Due to marijuana. Anyway, and after I met Prabhupada, I completely sobered up. I really didn't want it anymore. I knew it. It just didn't want it. Prabhupada told me the secret of just, I wasn't into heavy drugs, but that got me. So when I wrote my wife that I met a guru and I sat at his feet, she thought I was triple zonked. And so I came home and we went to New York and we're at Port Authority bus terminal. There's Diva Shaki and others in saris, dhotis distributing. So I walk up to them and I say, oh, I just got back from India. It was some months after Perfect Questions. And I walked up to them and I said, oh, hi, Hare Krishna. And I go, oh, I said, yeah, I met your guru in India. And all of a sudden, were you the Peace Corps worker? And I go, yeah. And they're slapping me on the back and like greeting me. And my wife standing, fiance then some distance away. And she says, he knows these people and they know him? Because the word had spread so quickly. And
even without Google.
Because some of the things Prabhupada had said, I didn't know it were the first time he had said them. And so it was kind of a shocking experience. But then my wife met Prabhupada and was so charmed by him. And when she met him, because I lived in India, so Prabhupada's accent was nothing to me. I mean, I could understand it all. When she met him, she had never heard an Indian accent. So she's asking Prabhupada a question. And she has that look on her face as Prabhupada speaking, like, I don't understand you. So Prabhupada turns to me, it's very funny, and goes, translate. Even though he was speaking English. Very, very funny. A lot of what Prabhupada said to me, and I listened to others, and I've seen it, is very, very funny. But because of the generational difference and the awe relationship and the cultural differences, it went right over our heads. But, you know, Prabhupada was very, very funny. And some people will write a good book on that one day. Maybe me. Okay, I think we're almost out of time. Tell me when, I don't know exactly when the time ends, but somebody can tell me. If anybody wants to, if there is more time, you can either ask questions or you can put it in the chat or comments.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you very much for this wonderful, wonderful book. It has such a huge impact on me in my very early Krishna consciousness. And also subsequently have also given it to so many of my friends, and some of them came to Krishna consciousness because of this book, actually. And actually, I also remember even that story about Radharani and how I reacted to it. And I thought I never really took it in the wrong way. I actually took that it was so sweet and there's so much depthness and love to Krishna consciousness. So hopefully you will not take it out.
No, I do not take it. I do not take anything out, but I will add commentary where it would help people understand in the introduction. I wanted to change the name of the book. A focus group in England, BBT, hired a focus group of non-devotees to look at all our books. And the focus group, when they looked at this one, they said the title was presumptuous. And so when they shared that with me and they wanted me to write introduction for a new edition, I said, why don't we change the title, make it a little humor? Perfect questions, perfect answers. A funny thing happened to me on the way to the Ganges. But the BBT is not known for their sense of humor, so they wouldn't do it. So I went and wrote the introduction and I called it a perfectly presumptuous title. And I described why the title was appropriate according to Prabhupada's teachings and understanding. So, but what was it, Anandamayi, that when you read the book that touched you?
I think it was like many devotees have mentioned that that it perfectly answered my own questions. And it answered them in such a simple and yet very profound way, in a way that it wasn't just the philosophical satisfaction that you get from it, but it was also the satisfaction in the heart. So in that way, like how Prabhupada is so simple. And yes, the questions were also perfect. And of course, the answers were perfect. So personally, I really love the title. I mean, it's such a legendary classic. And I really actually hope that the story that you have told us today about how it came about, maybe if you will happen to do the new version, maybe you can include that story as one of your introductions.
Thank you. I will have to think about that. I'm working with the BBT a lot now because we're the Bhaktivedanta Institute we have 5 books in production on science matters. And so I never talked to him about this book, but I'll talk to Vaisheshika about it. I'm putting my email address. Somebody has some question for me. One question came, how long it took you when you first saw the Kirtan Street, the first meeting Prabhupada in India? That was about almost 4 years. Which at that time, when you're 20 years old, 4 years is 1/4 of my life. It's a long time. Now 4 years is, Lakshmi Moni and I don't talk about that anymore. Okay, I think it's my time. If not, let me know. Whoever is a timekeeper, let me know when I'm supposed to end. As that great Vaishnav said, brevity is a soul of wit. That was Shakespeare. Okay, thank you very much. You've been wonderful. I love all the comments and questions. Somebody had something else I needed to know. I did put my email there. And it's nice to see you all in Montreal. And welcome to Florida.
Ottawa.
Or Ottawa, wherever, I don't know, wherever you are. It's all Canada. Americans don't know geography. Americans don't know geography. We think Luxembourg's next to Sydney. Don't worry. Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Brahmatirtha Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Brahmatirtha Prabhu, Guru Prasad here.
Oh.
I definitely want to thank you for kindly accepting our invitation and be present. And you are really funny. Thank you.
I'm glad I could, I once gave a class at Krishna House in Gainesville. And afterwards, one young person who had joined the class came up to me afterwards, said he really liked my class. I said, what did you like about it? And he gave me the biggest compliment I ever received. It's a compliment so rare. Hardly anybody that gives class ever gets this compliment, but I'll share it with you. And he said to me, I said, what'd you like about the class? He says, I didn't fall asleep once. The rarest of compliments. I was once at a class, I won't mention details, but I watched the speaker fall asleep. That's the true story. We won't mention names. Okay.
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 Thanks
Hare
again.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We'll be in touch. Haribol.
Thank you very much. Guru Prasad, I appreciate. Haribol.
Thank you. Okay, dear devotees, as usual, we'll have a short bhajan and a kirtan before we conclude this evening's program. Stay on. Haribol.